Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm so happy to be presenting my Tarot in the Kitchen, Tarot Every Which Way workshop. Oh, there's so many people in here. Thank you so much for us. I'm in New Orleans, so it's morning time. So if it's morning time for you, thank you. If it's late at night for you, thank you. I just so appreciate you coming and listening to what I have to say and all the other wonderful presentations today. So I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be a Llewellyn author, and let's get going. Right on. I promise I'm usually not this chipper. It's the coffee, but we'll talk about coffee in a minute. Yeah, sure. Somebody wants to know if they could grab your deck. Yeah, grab your deck if you want. That'll be helpful. And what else was I going to say? Oh, I'm going to go through as many cards as we can. We only have a half hour today, so I will do my best to be quick. You know, I'm originally from New York, so I do go quick sometimes. So it's a good thing it's recorded. You can always get it later and rewatch it and all of those kinds of things. And all the info's in the book too, so hooray. All right, so we're going to start with tarot in the kitchen, right? Like, why would you have tarot in the kitchen? Well, the premise of my book, I've been a card reader for, somebody asked me yesterday, over 40 years now professionally. As old. But yeah, that's where we're at. And it was that everybody has their own way of approaching witchcraft and magic and things like that, right? And I know a lot of us are kitchen witches. I'm a kitchen witch. I grew up with my grandparents in the kitchen, you know, climbing up onto the counter and helping them add spices and everything. And for me, that was always magic, you know, and they would tell me different kinds of folklore, folk magic, traditional wisdom from their respective cultures. And that was something I always sort of just filed away in my head. And all of these things came together when I was coming up with the food recipes and the correspondences for this Tarot in the Kitchen parts of the book. And I also checked other people's things as well. So it's not just my information you're getting quite a few years of research and study and things like that, and notations and whatnot. So how can you use tarot in the kitchen, right? Like, okay, am I talking about put your cards in the pot? No, that would ruin your cards. But I am talking about there's different energies, different elemental significances, and things like that for the card. And there's also culinary correspondences that we can have for the cards. So maybe you're getting the same card over and over again. I know this happens to, especially those of us who are professional readers or those who read for themselves on a regular basis. Sometimes you see these cards coming up over and over and over again. And that's really, really wonderful. And for me, I think that I will do it a recipe. Maybe it's that time of year, right? Like we're talking about the Fool to start with. The Fool has to do with new beginnings. Has to do with sometimes rebirth in a way. I think too also is part of this card and how it resonates. There is this component of being foolish, right? Like that whole kind of newness and freshness sometimes comes with the word folly, and I talk about that a little bit in the book. But the Fool is 0 in most decks. I don't know what decks everybody has in front of them, but in most decks 0 comes before the regular traditional major arcana cards, but in a few decks it actually comes from, you know, goes at the end of the cards. So there's a way in which it has this beginning and ending to things. In one of my favorite decks, it's represented by an Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its tail. So it has this kind of cyclical nature. Things are turning around and beginning again, a theme we see over and over again in the tarot cards. But let's talk about the Fool, right? What are the things? I've got a graphic up there for you. What are the things that are associated with the Fool traditionally? And some of the things that are associated with the Fool traditionally when we go through it are, I got ginseng, frankincense, don't eat that, peppermint, German chamomile, cypress, don't eat that either. and rose is another one that people use in culinary recipes. So how can you use these things specifically in your recipes? Well, a lot of these things are very simple. Something like peppermint. There's lots of different things that contain peppermint that you can cook or you can buy. A lot of people drink peppermint tea. It's very refreshing. It's also energizing, something that sort of resonates with the Fool, right? Like this newness that we're getting refreshed and rejuvenated and energized and ready to start something new. So, especially when it's hot in the summertime, I think we had up to 110 heat index yesterday in New Orleans. So, it's already hot here and it's only June. So basically that's something that I like to make a bunch of and just have it on hand. Mint tea, same deal with chamomile tea at night. That will give you sort of a prophetic dream vibe, right? People use chamomile tea even in medicinal purposes for rest and sleep and things like that. It's an herb of the fairies. So if you're doing any kind of fairy magic, working with the fairies, you can use chamomile as a tea. What's another way that we can use this in the kitchen, not only for culinary things? And one of the things I love to do is make magical floor washes, magical cleaning supplies, and things like that. So what do I mean by that? I just mentioned two things we can use for that: peppermint and chamomile. Both of those can be made into a tea. You can add a few drops of that tea to your cleaning liquid. You can add it to the wash when you're washing the floor. Sometimes I'll put it in a bottle and sprinkle it around before I Swiffer the floors and things like that. So this is another way to bring the magic of tarot into your home and cleaning and things like that. Oh, somebody said they can't use peppermint. That's fine. There's plenty of other things that you can use right here. Certainly don't use it if you're allergic. Certainly don't use it on your skin or eat it if you might have a sensitivity to it. But as a rule, I'm not really gigantic about substitutions. In this sense, it's not really a substitution. It's more that these are other herbs that are used for these things in this context. Somebody was talking about orange zest and rose hips. Orange zest for me is something that I love to use both in the kitchen and in the garden. It's got a lot of properties similar to not chemicals, similar to the chemicals found in peppermint that are used to keep away insects. Peppermint's also used to keep away rodents and things like that. So for me, it's like a win-win, right? Like when you're using it there. And if you don't want to, again, for the person who was allergic, if you don't want to use it in your kitchen because maybe somebody was allergic in the house, you can still use that as a sprinkling water for the outside of your house, right? Like you can sprinkle around in the corners of your property and just a little bit, right? Not anything to make anybody allergic, but enough to get the magical and the physical properties out there. So I have a lot of recipes in this book. One of the things that I always associate with the Fool card is eggs, right? We're talking about this beginning and ending. What came first, the chicken or the egg? We may never know. But what we do know is that eggs have to do with beginnings, and there's all different types of eggs. I'm luckily enough to get yard eggs here in New Orleans. So my neighbor lets me have $5 a dozen. She's so sweet to me. I still get my eggs at old school prices, and I also can get things like duck eggs. And for those of you who can't find them, sometimes some of the fancy schmancier markets, like Whole Paycheck and whatnot, will have things like quail eggs and stuff like that. And those are very good for this kind of rejuvenation and newness and new beginnings. And the recipe that I have in here is for Fool's Deviled Eggs. I've got April Fool's Day, right? On April 1st. At that time, they do something in France where they have fool's fish. They're like jellied fish, kind of like, I think here in the US, we call them Swedish fish. I don't know why we think they're Swedish. And the French poisson rouge, they have these little red jellied fish that they have at that time. So that's, again, a fish dish might be what you want to have to represent the Fool. You can make this, again, as something just for yourself. You can make it for your whole family. Deviled eggs is something I usually like to bring to gatherings, right? Old school potluck kind of dish, right? And everybody knows me for my deviled eggs. Uh, so it's something that I like to bring again to magical gatherings and potlucks and things like that to just represent the new beginning that we're all sharing in that moment. You know, this may be the first time for a lot of people at some of these gatherings. It may be, even if it's not the actual first time that people are coming together, it's the first time in this time and space of the universe. And we're using that minute to begin something new and to refresh ourselves and to realize our possibility and potential. So that's something that, excuse me, that I really like to have connected to the full card. All right. I spent 11 minutes and I only have a half hour, so we're going to move on. The Magician, number one, the Magus card, that is the top deck there. I put these cards attached to the presentation because these are the two most popular decks here in the United States, the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Thoth deck. Most people I find probably at some point in their history of reading used one or other of these decks. So these images are very familiar to people. But by all means, if you have your own deck in front of you, pull those out, start looking at that, those kinds of things. I mentioned before we started coffee. Look, I made my own Tarot Every Which Way coffee cups. They have the Tarot Every Which Way stickers on them. You know, if people want to go to my website, email me, whatever. I still have stickers left, free stickers. Get a hold of me. Social media, all of those things. But okay, so one of the things I love to do for the Magician, you know, we're talking about that again. We've moved from the Fool, this newness, the beginning, into the first manifestation of magic. In most decks, you see it there in the top deck. I don't know if you can, I've got my tarot shirt on. I'm going to stand up and hopefully not fall over. I've got my lover's card on. But what you have in most decks is one hand up and one hand down. I know I'm tiny on the side of my screen. Hopefully you can see that. But in this sense, as above, so below, right? Like we're manifesting into both worlds simultaneously. So this first manifestation of magic, this first foray into both worlds, into both realms, meaning the physical and the spiritual, or the, living and the dead, whatever, however you want to, script your polarity into the spiritual world. It could be any of these things, but the Magician is the first manifestation of that, the first waking up of that. So again, what I'm using here is coffee. There's a recipe in the book called the Magician's Coffee Cup, which you can make it alcoholic or not make it alcoholic. It uses, I'm here in New Orleans, so we have chicory coffee. So chicory coffee is, I think it's probably because we had so many Sicilians. That's a whole talk for another time, but there was a bunch of expatriates, Sicilians that were citrus growers here, and with them they bought sort of the magic of chicory. So we always have chicory in our coffee. It is also really good for waking up and for enlivening things. It's a nod to the ancestors. It's a nod to the earth. When they put chicory in coffee, it's chicory root. So we're talking about something that literally grows down deep into the earth. The other things that we have here associated with the Magician card and the food aspect of things, we've got not just coffee, but marigolds. Marigold blossoms are something that's used cross-culturally. It's used in, excuse me, Indian, Hindu culture. It is used in a lot of times here in Native American culture. It's used in Mexican culture. It's used in all of these different things for different reasons. But again, it has to do with this connection to the spirit world. Check exactly what type of marigold you're getting. But when you buy edible blossoms in the supermarket, very often marigold is in that mix that you're going to get. So eating the marigold flowers that you have checked is safe with the package and all of those kinds of things. They're kind of, people add them to salads and things like that. That's another really good way. Rosemary, again, something that is used cross-culturally. I practice African traditional religion. In those cultures, it is always used for uncrossing and removal of negativity. So that's also something that I think is really important to keep in mind when you're starting out with your magic. And as I mentioned, this card is representative of starting something out magically, beginning something magically, your first rays into that magical power and manifestation. So in that particular, I know I've got questions. Please save them till the end. I promise I will leave time at the end to answer as many questions as I can. But rosemary is something, again, that is very easy to add to any of your other dishes. You can add it to savory dishes. If you're making a soup or a stew, adding something, a little bit of rosemary is very helpful about just getting that vibe, that energy of the magician card out there. The other thing that I have here that is going to come back over and over again when we're talking about different kinds of cards, because this is not just for one card, it's for lots of different cards, is roses. Now, rose petals, one of my favorite films, like Water for Chocolate, there's an amazing scene where she makes quail, I believe, with rose petals for the wedding, and everybody sort of gets magically intoxicated on the meal that she's made for her love, who's marrying somebody else. It's not a spoiler alert. Everybody knows the story at this point, right? Didn't Gabriel Garcia Marquez get some kind of award for literature for that book? So no spoilers. Wonderful movie, wonderful TV show, all of those things. Wonderful book. Please read it. But there's this way that we can enchant our food. And that scene for me is one of the things that's just so beautiful, that manifestation and using roses in your cooking. Obviously, more often sweet dishes than savory dishes. But as I just mentioned, when she does the rose petals and the quail, you can do meat and flower petals, rose petals. That's a delicious way of sort of getting into things. Something that people might not know, lots of times in Middle Eastern culture, they use rose water in their cooking. So if you have a Middle Eastern grocery store, or you can go online and get food grade rose water and use that to cook with. That's something that I do very often, especially for summer desserts and dishes like that, using a little bit of rose water to make, sugar cookies, or putting some rose water into, icings or glazes or stuff like that. So that's a really easy way to get that manifestation in there. All right, moving on. We are going to go to the High Priestess card. Yay, here we go. This is one of my favorite cards. I am the High Priestess in the Tarot of the Burrows deck, which is unfortunately no longer available. However, you might be able to find a copy in somebody's store or something like that. But when they had asked me, what card do you want to be? I was like, the High Priestess, right? Everybody, right? This first manifestation of the divine feminine. And I'm not all about polarities, but there is a lot in the tarot that is structured through these kind of gender polarities. But I obviously believe that any person of any gender identifying body can connect to any of the cards in any way that they see fit. So that said, let's move on. This is the first manifestation of the divine feminine. It's connected to lots of different goddesses: Inanna, Ishtar, Lilith, all of these kinds of, Venus, these kinds of sacred energies that manifest through the divine feminine. If we look at it from a traditional old school witchcraft perspective, the High Priestess is representative of both the maiden and the crone. So this kind of maiden energy that comes with newness and beginnings and first forays into that kind of sacred feminine energy. Excuse me. And the crone energy, that kind of wise, sacred, older, divine feminine energy that sort of attaches to the primal mothers, the four mothers throughout time. So it's both this kind of physical energy and this mental wisdom and acumen that comes from, decades upon decades upon decades of seen it, done it, doing it, over it. As many postmenopausal people would say, there's an over it component too. There's a sort of restructuring where we are about it and not suffering fools, to use a tarot joke right there. The recipes that I used for the High Priestess have lots of the different connected things that we have in there. And one of the things that we have in here is sage. I mentioned clary sage, but obviously you can use kitchen sage, garden sage, which is the kind that you can, again, get in any spice section of any market, and use that to sort of bring this. I think sage really leans into this idea of having there be uh, protection and purification as we go into these forays into magic. You know, I think that this is something that is really important when we think about our first beginnings of magic and what we're doing with magic. And it's certainly important if you're doing any kind of magic or readings for anybody else, because you want to make sure that yourself is protected and secure and safe from picking up any of those energies. That's why I think it's one of these things that's great, that when we look at sage as kind of like, it's in quote unquote poultry seasoning, right? The thing that we cover our turkeys in, if we still eat one around Thanksgiving time here in the US. But it's something that traditionally goes with it. So it's something that we always have that inbuilt protection. And again, it's something that you can very easily to add to any poultry dish. You can very easily add it to any kind of, salad or anything that you're making. You can add it to any kind of soup you're making. It's very versatile and it's very useful. Lemon is also another thing that we use here. We've got lemons, I think, probably because they're so ancient, right? We talk about some of the earliest things that were cultivated, and citrus is definitely on this list. It wasn't necessarily a lemon, it was an earlier parent. And again, it sort of ticks in my head as I'm talking about protection in lemons, because anybody who's really into growing lemons knows that the earliest citrus was obviously the parent of the lemons. They're very, very spiky, and they still graft citrus trees onto parents that have that spiky, hardy citrus gene. So when I say spiky, I'm talking about like, an inch and a half, like 2-inch spikes. So you've got something that's coming that is so associated with this kind of like, oh, I have lemon bars, or I have, lemon meringue pie, which is connected to the goddess, but it also has that protective energy, in the sense that that thing grew on something that had like totally like poke your eye out medieval type energy spikes. So these things that are going together. Citrus, specifically lemon in this context, is also really good for drawing out any negativity. So it's one of the things that I always recommend for when people are having these kinds of family gatherings where things might get tense, right? Like, families from birth or families chosen, sometimes, personalities clash, or there's a little tension, or somebody has a little too much whatever, and there's maybe you have to tolerate somebody who is politically or ethically or sobriety wise not on the same page as you. So using lemons in this way as part of your cooking, I think, is said to sort of absorb all the bitterness from people that are around and absorb all that negativity. So what you can do when you're cooking these things, making these things, it's a good idea to add lemon to the recipes. Obviously, you can add it to savory dishes too, marinades and things like that. And that will help get some of the bitterness out of the individuals who are eating it, and, it transformed into something else through the eating of that lemon. So that's one of the things that I do. I mentioned that I've got 2 recipes stuck in here. Both of them are to honor goddesses in all forms. One of them is High Priestess pomegranate salad. And again, contact me if you want one of these lovely little cards that Llewellyn came up with that has the recipe for it. But basically, it includes pomegranates, right? We think about the underworld. We think about this Demeter and Persephone story associated with the High Priestess going into another realm, going into darkness, that kind of thing. So it includes cucumbers, pomegranates, olive oil, again, something that goes back to ancient times, vinegar, pomegranate juice, orange or lemon juice, salad greens, green onions, black olives, feta cheese, salt and pepper to taste. Something very simple. As I said, you can message me and I will send this to you. and along with some other swag goodies because I'm a nice person like that. And the other recipe that I have in here is pistachio stuffed dates. So again, we look back to the earliest, most ancient goddesses. Things like dates were something that was one of the most early cultivated foods, stuffed with pistachios, stuffed with, ricotta cheese or feta cheese or something like that. Again, this goes back to some of the earliest foods that were eaten by humans of any type. So I apologize. It's 9:25, and I know people have questions and things like that. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Go through this. Oh, somebody's talking about their lemons and their pomegranate trees. Somebody's saying they're going to bring lemons to their next family reunion. Yeah, that's great. Pick with care wild lemon. Yeah, no, I've had trees that unfortunately went back to the rootstock as well, and you've got some sort of mixy weird lemon. A lot of people have citrus here in New Orleans, and people always bake me a bag of something that's like, this could be lemon or it could be something else. I mean, it's definitely edible, but some of it tastes a little bit more like an orange, or some of it tastes a little bit more like some of the early, we got satsumas here. So some of it tastes a little bit like different things and different kinds of things. All right, so let's see what we have here. A link or email to contact. I'm going to put my email, if it'll let me, into the chat right now. So people can get a hold of me. It's voodoouniverse@yahoo.com. Whoops. My phone is on French. I apologize. So it's putting all these weird French characters in here. There we go. Okay. There's my email. There we go. All right. A question about the eggs. Do we need to remove the clear film on the inside of the shell before we dry them? I'm curious about drying them. Why would you dry them? that's my response to your question. You're not using the eggshell, so you're using the middle of the eggs. So you can use the eggshells in protection magic if you want. So yes, if you're going to dry them and use them in protection magic, then I would wash it out. Otherwise, the albumen and the other stuff that's stuck to the eggshell will get really nasty and funky, and you'll get bugs and things of that nature. So usually what I do, if I'm going to use them for magic or in the garden or keep them for any amount of time, I wash them and then I dry them and then I crush them. Okay, let's see. New messages. To keep birds or squirrels from your fruit trees, put holographic ribbon in the branches. Okay, that's interesting. There we go. Eggs in this economy. Haha, that's true. Very true. Yeah, I wouldn't. That's how when I bring them to a party, I'm like, this is what I really love you because I have brought deviled eggs to this party. You know how much these cost me? Okay. Somebody asked me, since I'm a professional reader and a kitchen witch, do I work with tasseography? I have in the past worked with tasseography. I mean, we all have our strengths, right? Like, this is why I decided to write the book, because some people feel more comfortable in the kitchen, some people feel more comfortable in the garden, and that's really how their magic comes through strength wise. For me, I don't know what it is, but for some reason I'm not one of these people, even though I have a degree in anthropology, I also have a degree in film, but I am not one who gets visuals with things. So I have done tasseography, but it's hard for me to make that kind of leap between this is what I'm seeing in the cup and this is how that translates to the future. It's much easier for me to see symbols that are more formed. I'm good with tasseography in the sense of like, oh, if there's 3 dots in your cup and they're in this quadrant, then that means that. I'm less good with, oh, I see a man riding on a horse through a forest, picking his nose and having a swig of Chardonnay. I don't see those things. So I tend to use tasseography less than I do other forms of divination. Yeah. What inspired me to connect the two together? Well, I wrote the book because I was working with a client who's had a teenage son that was special needs and nonverbal, and he had been striking out against her violently, and she was having a really hard time reaching him. So, and I had a hard time explaining to her how to reach him. So I came up with the correspondences. Well, if you cook these foods, then that will help him connect with his thoughts and his feelings and his dream self and his frustrations. And you'll be able to have a more calmer interaction. So that was where it started. And she made the recipes for him, and it worked wonderfully. And we just sort of continued from there. I wanted something that could connect the food that I loved and the magic of food with the magic of the cards. Tasseography, tea leaf reading. Yeah. Okay. Oh, another anthro person. Hooray. I think I'm actually going to be presenting at the AAA's in New Orleans. If any anthropologist people out there are coming to the AAA's in New Orleans this fall, please hit me up. AAA's, American Anthropological Association. Woohoo. All right. Thank you, everybody. Are there any more questions? I mean, another really great thing, since I just have another quick minute, is there's a working that I have, an exercise that I have in the book about getting to know your cards, getting to know your new deck. And I think one of the things that I talk about in that section is sharing a meal with your cards in order to better connect with them. And I think that any of the recipes in this book would be something that would be wonderful to make and actually share with your cards. And that process is just setting up some kind of tarot altar, getting your new deck, setting a place setting for the cards, setting a place setting for you, placing it out in front of the cards and placing it out in front of you. And then as you eat, having a mental conversation between you and the cards. And then when you're done, taking the food out and leaving it on the earth to biodegrade. Obviously, that's natural. Food will biodegrade. If it's meat or something, it'll probably attract animals. So probably try and do that somewhere that's not as, don't do it next to your doorstep where you'll get possums living under my house. Tarot every which way. You came in late. And what's happening in New Orleans in the fall with anthropologists, that's the American Anthropological Association conference for anthropology academics. But yes, thank you everybody. Find me on social media. Enjoy all the wonderful, wonderful other presentations that are happening. And thank you so much. What 2 decks do I use? In there primarily for this presentation, I use the Rider-Waite-Smith and the Thoth deck, but in the book, there's I think 6 different decks that I use because I wanted to be really cross-cultural and representative. It has the Santa Muerte deck. It has the, from the cover is the Tarot of the Witches, the Tarot of the Vampires. There's also the Gustave Doré deck. There is so many different decks in here that I use because I think people get their Millennium Thoth Tarot. People get their mind hung up on one deck or another. And there's lots of ways to have these things manifest and, just sort of exist. Oh, the Mermaid Tarot. That's one of my favorites. That's in here as well. Thank you so much, everybody, and have a great day.